Okay.
All
Thanks
right.
again for joining us, Krista. If you want to go ahead and take it away.
Okay, I'm Krista Weber. My current role is behavior specialist for Mount Vernon School Corporation. However, I have 15 years experience in school counseling, and that's my background and my passion. And so I think I've learned a lot over the years about the counselor's role in behavior. And so with my previous roles and with this role, so I just want to share some of what I've learned, most of which is pulled straight from research. Okay, so if you can go ahead, Amanda. Okay, so what do we think? Should school counselors be involved with student behavior?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a big yes for the most part. In some places I'm learning though, some school counselors kind of feel like that's a refer out kind of thing. And so I just really want to empower us that we can have a huge impact because we are there every day. And yes, Amanda, you're right on that. That's going to be a slide in a little bit. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so if you just want to click through, so school counseling from behavior from the school counseling lens. Okay, so we are actually uniquely trained and qualified to have a significant impact on student behavioral change, right? Think of our training in child development, therapeutic, and behavioral theories. That was not just stuff that we learned to pass a licensing exam. We can actually apply it in our work with students and their behaviors. Many of us have also done a lot of training in trauma-informed care and practices. And then in our roles, we're just privy to information that brings light to maybe what's happening underneath that behavior, right? We might know about involvement with DCS. We might know the family for years because we've been the school counselor and we've seen kid after kid after kid. And we know the trauma or the history for that family and for that student. And then of course we often get to work with students for multiple years. And so I've always found that gives me a different lens on their behavior because I can see where we started. And yeah, are we taking baby steps? For sure, but I can see the growth. Whereas a teacher maybe only has them for a short amount of time and it's harder to see that long-term growth. And so we get to advocate for students and kind of witness that behavioral change. So Amanda's question was, or comment was about not discipline, right? Yes, we are not talking about discipline here. We're talking about behavioral change, not disciplinary actions. So let's just, that's a stance by ASCA and all school counselors that we do not want to be involved in discipline. Okay, so things we need to consider. How do you know when a behavior plan is warranted? And you can go ahead and kind of click through, Amanda. So is there an impact on the learning or the environment, the learning environment of others, right? If it's a significant impact, then that might suggest that we might need to move forward with a behavior plan of some kind. We also want to consider their age and development. Sometimes we're going to have, I think sometimes even young teachers that have big reactions to some behaviors. I'm thinking with my elementary lens right now with some small friends who have never been in school before. And some of their behaviors are concerning, but are they actually age appropriate? And so then our tier 1 strategies and supports, we need to give them time to work before we would jump to some kind of individual plan. We also want to look at consistency, frequency, intensity, and duration, right? And so consistency, are we seeing these behaviors everywhere the student goes? Does it only happen in math class? That's valid information that's going to help us kind of have a hypothesis of the level of intensity and support that might be needed. And then I also think looking any time questions, right? Is it happening? When is it happening? Are the behaviors happening all day long? Are they happening every morning? Are they happening on Fridays before the student goes home for the weekend. Like there's a lot of things that we can kind of hypothesize around when these behaviors are happening. And then, of course, always we want to consider previous history as to why this behavior might be happening. Okay, so then we're going to look at collaborating. So we want to collaborate with teachers, parents, and caregivers, the student, if possible. Age might dictate that, right? But we definitely want to involve the student when we can, and at least assess their motivations. And then administration, and then the counselor or social worker. I'm not saying all those people have to be present for all those meetings, but we do want to get input from all of the relevant stakeholders in order to have a consistent approach moving forward. One thing I see often is that parents aren't included, and I think that's a really big mistake because you want to include them early and often instead of waiting until the car is on fire and too far down the tracks. So I really encourage involving parents early and often. Okay, so we're going to use this picture of a plant with roots for the next part. One thing that is super important is looking at the needs and motivations of the student. Okay, so what the behaviors we see would be the leaves, right? And then the need is what we see under the behavior. And so that's the roots. So those could be things like skill deficit of any kind. It could be academic, it could be behavioral, social, emotional. They might have a need for voice and they don't know how to appropriately use their voice or don't feel empowered to do so. And then, of course, there might be basic needs that are unmet that we could easily meet those needs and perhaps see a different product after that. The other thing we want to consider is what are the consequences of the behavior. If you've learned anything about like ABC model, the consequence is the thing that maintains the behavior. So I used to think if a student, kind of was class clown in math class, let's say, and they got sent to the office, I used to think the consequence was getting sent to the office. When actually, if the need under the behavior was social connection and everyone laughed because of what they were saying, the consequence was actually that everyone laughed. So the behavior actually met the need. And so if we don't look at it appropriately and assess what the consequence is, we're going to keep kind of throwing darts at the wrong wall. So we want to make sure that we're thinking of needs and motivations and consequences. So we're going to look at a scenario. All right, almost every day, Jaden engages in refusal or defiant behavior during independent work time in math. When this happens, he is sent to the hall. Okay, so I think if you click one more time, what is the potential motivation of his behavior? Why might he be doing that? What do we think?
He doesn't like math. It gets him out of math work.
Mm-hmm.
Or he struggles with it.
Or he struggles with it. Yeah. So you have identified, if you click the next slide, math is somehow tied to the need, right? In some way, the need is going to be related to math and or independent work time, right? Independent work is hard for a lot of kids. What's the consequence of his behavior?
He doesn't have to do it. He gets sent out.
Mm-hmm. So if the need is he doesn't know how to do math or doesn't know how to work independently and he gets sent to the hall, he kind of got what he wanted, but we didn't actually meet the need, which is likely math or confidence in math, right? Okay, so we're going to break it down and you can click one more time, sorry. Okay. All right, so what we see, what we might identify this as is the leaves that we see are work refusal and defiance, right? That's what a teacher is going to say. This is what I see, work refusal and defiance. What we might consider is that the need under those behaviors might be he doesn't know how to ask for help or doesn't feel safe or comfortable asking for help, doesn't want people to know he's struggling. He has a skill deficit of some kind in math, or low self-worth or confidence regarding math or independence with work time. Okay, so you nailed it. His need might be a skill deficit in math. It could be all three of these things, honestly. And then the consequence is that he avoids and escapes the work. Does that help the need? No, he gets further behind because he's not in class, right? So this would be a situation where we would want to look at, if this is happening cyclically every day, I said almost every day, this would be a great time for a school counselor to intervene. Okay, so let's look at what that might look like. Okay, so we're going to design the behavior plan to address the need under the behavior. So I put the 3 here. You don't have to come up with a plan that might hit every single need. You could really just start with 1 and say, okay, I think it's a skill deficit. So as a counselor, I'm going to advocate for a plan that includes small group instruction and some kind of math academic intervention. That's how the counselor could be involved. If I see it as voice as the need, I'm going to work with that student on self-advocacy skills, right? How can I ask? I might role play. We might do this a lot, right? And provide check-ins so that they feel that they have at least one place that their voice is heard and can provide that support. There's many times as a school counselor, I became math teacher too. And so we have to meet the needs that walk into our office as much as we can. And then low self-worth, if we can identify that, and I would say, I can't put a percentage on it, but it's a high percentage of behavioral problems that we see can have low self-worth as the root. And if we can have that, if we can adapt that lens when we're working with students, it changes everything with how I respond. And so I can respond with positive affirmations. I can build that student up as much as possible. I can get the teacher involved and the parents involved. And we are all trying to build that student's self-worth together. And then we can celebrate small wins, chunk it. Right? Like that math assignment, that work time is hard. I want you to try 2 and then check in with the teacher and let's see how it goes. And so there's a lot of ways that we can do that, but none of this will be effective if we just look at it as non-compliance or work refusal. We have to dig deeper. Okay, so for our goals, for this one, we're going to look at improving self-worth. Like I said, that's often underneath all the layers. And then especially with younger students, I would say actually all students, increasing self-awareness for the behaviors and just helping them realize, like, when I feel when I feel like I can't do something, I shut down. And then my teachers think that I don't care about math, or you know what I mean? And so we're building their self-awareness so that they can see, catch themselves. And for lifelong behavioral change and success, self-awareness has got to be part of it. And so we get to really come alongside students to help equip them and increase their self-awareness. We're going to focus on progress, not perfection, okay? I hate it when I see goals that are written for 100%. None of us are perfect, and we can't expect that of our kids. So we want to make sure that the goals are attainable, but also developmentally appropriate if it's like for talking out and not raising your hand. What's a baseline for all students? If all students are only doing that about 80% of the time, then my goal for this student is going to be a little bit lower than that, and then we'll build up to that 80%. But we want to consider developmentally appropriate goals, and then making sure that they're measurable if at all possible. And I think we're going to talk about ways that they can be, how they can be measurable on the next slide. All right, data. So there's a lot of things. When people hear behavior plan, they think behavior chart. I have done a lot of behavior charts in my years. Sometimes they can be effective, but I am of the opinion that they are often triggering and less effective. And so it's not all about behavior charts. There's other ways to get data, but there are some behavior charts that are effective, and students love it. Maybe they are used to that from home. They have like a chore chart or something, and so they don't see anything negative associated with it. The older students get, the more I would encourage not using behavior charts because of the social implications of that. But when we do use behavior charts, we want to use positive phrasing. Completed work versus didn't get started, right? Like ways that we can phrase it with what we want to see, and that's what we want to measure. And then just being mindful of those backfires, like when they have a rough morning, sometimes students want to then just tank the rest of the day. And so maybe building in incremental goals so that they can feel success, little wins throughout the day, and can learn that a rough moment or a rough morning doesn't have to mean a rough day, and I can overcome the mistakes that I made in the morning. You can also do teacher reports or that are more anecdotal or can be quantitative. I used to do like shared spreadsheets with teachers when we were just really trying to figure out and collect information on what's happening when it's happening. And the parent and myself and the teacher had this spreadsheet that we could all see in live time, and that anecdotal information was able to help us understand that it felt like behaviors were happening all the time, but they were happening during a certain chunk of the morning. And so that was really helpful as well. And then when you keep data electronically, depending on what your school district uses, it does open up a lot of opportunities to be able to be collaborative with parents and include lots of teachers because everyone can have access. And then you can also utilize student reports with self-reflection and self-monitoring, just having them tally when they do whatever the skill is that we're working on. If it's raising your hand, tallying every time that happened, and that improves their self-awareness, but that also boosts their confidence in being able to do what's expected. And then real quick, we're going to talk about communication. Just remember that everyone that has that student would need to be aware of that plan. And so not just the teacher that brought the concern, but everyone. And then when you meet, you would want to designate ideally one person that is kind of the gatekeeper of communication. So it's no one feels bombarded with all the things. You would come up with a plan of how and when you're going to communicate. And that's clear for parents so that they know when to expect it, but also kind of provide some boundaries for you're going to receive an update this frequently. This is how it's going to come. And here's your way to ask questions if needed. Then you would also kind of come up with a plan on reinforcers, whether that's something that we can do at school with just positive affirmation or quality time, like a lunch with a teacher that doesn't cost any money, or it could be something. There's a lot of times that parents are like, oh, you can't offer anything that they would be motivated by, but we can offer this at home. And so you can work together on that, but you want to be clear on that reinforcement plan. And then you would set follow-up expectations for when the next meeting would be. And whether we're seeing progress, what happens next, or if we're not seeing progress, what would be the next follow-up step from that. So nothing is a surprise, and everyone is on the same page. So the last slide just has kind of a recap of the steps. The only thing I want to highlight is each school is in a different place with MTSS implementation and all of that. And so I want to make sure that one, school counselor should be part of your MTSS team. If you're a school counselor and you're not part of it, ask and advocate to join that. If your MTSS team at times might trump what a school counselor would do on their own, and so just being really open and upfront, so that you know if this is something that maybe I'm going to try something on my own, low level, it's not formal, this is not an IEP or a BIP or a 504, right? And if that works, great. If not, then know that you need to take it to the next step if this is not considered part of your MTSS process. Ideally, counselors are always included in that. And then I think everything else is covered on there. The last slide shows some resources. These are just samples of what our district uses. A homeschool plan is just a plan between parents and school personnel, usually the teacher, where you identify one shared goal, and how you're going to work on it at school and how they're going to work on it at home. And there's even on the second page a script for teachers to use if phone calls are scary or they don't know how to have this conversation. So that has been a really valuable tool that we've been able to offer. And then the others are a sample behavior plan and a sample behavior chart that could be used. And so again, these are just like suggestions. It's not for everyone. But then on that third slide for this file, there is a link for a sample of how you would input the data to see if progress is taking place. So that was a lot of information. I know that we have some time constraints, but do you have any questions about any of that?
I do not. Thank you for getting it done, because I I do need to get moving to the next meeting. But thank you very much for the presentation. I've got some good notes, and I'll be probably going back through that. Thank you very much.
Good.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Krista. I always love sample documents. I think those are so helpful for people so they don't have to start from scratch with things too. We do have, for the other two on the call, do you have any questions or comments or anything? You can either unmute or you can add anything into the chat. And you may, I know some people you may have a student in your office. I don't know.
Sorry, I was eating.
Oh,
I don't have any questions really. It's just, it's super helpful. And I kept thinking about last year, because last year is my actual first year in middle school, but now I'm in high school, and so many things that I'm like, I don't know how this could ever be implemented in high school.
Right. Yeah, it's harder. It is amazing to me how school counseling roles almost feel like completely different jobs at times, depending on the level that you're at. And you're experiencing that because you've been at multiple levels. But I do think there are things that we can do in the world of advocacy and kind of education on some of the trauma-informed practices and behavioral concerns that can provide help. It may not be in the form of a formalized plan at the high school. We can also advocate if even if it's just advocating for a team to get involved, even if it's not you. Yeah.
I saw there was a chat.
Yeah, I just saw it.
Sorry.
What if you can't be on the MTSS team because of time constraints based on shortage of people? For example, we have 2 rounds of buses and I have to be one of the adults for the second round because my teachers are in meetings and they have the MTSS meetings during that time. I mean, I think at times, even being like a member where you have access to everything and you can provide input and you can, ahead of meetings, put your concerns in, like you can still have some involvement. My pie in the sky recommendation would be for them to get creative on who else could, but I understand when there's a shortage, that's hard for bus duty, car duty, all of those things. But still being able to have a recap, or at the very least, like I know at our high school, we have an at-risk meeting once, I think it's once a month. I don't always make it. And all the counselors are involved in that one. And so they've created a second meeting that can involve the counselors that happens during the school day, which just also is hard with scheduling, but that's how they do it here.
Yeah, I wonder if, sorry, I was echoing. Hope I'm not echoing for you. I wonder if, with scheduling too, they could schedule kids that you work with or kids who are at MTSS for behavior reasons, if they could arrange that so you could attend those, and maybe if it's just like a straight academic need, like just like needs math support or something that you don't need to be there, then you could be doing the bus duty, but they can figure out a way to make it so that you can come to the ones that are relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is
Or if
hard.
it's once
It's
a
all
week.
connected.
Yes.
Like an example, like it can look like academics, or it can look like behavior, and the need could actually be academics. The number of times students have told me, and these are their words, I would rather be the bad kid than the dumb kid.
Yeah.
It often looks like behavior when it's something very different under the surface. So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add, if it's a once a week meeting or a twice a month meeting, maybe just for those, 1 or 2 days a month, they could find somebody else to do the bus duty so that you could be there, because I'd say that's an important role for the counselor to work with any students who need like that tier 2 support. Good question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you think of any other questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. Just FYI, National School Counseling Week is coming up the first week of February. I've dropped in a couple of resources here in case you do want to celebrate. Not only is that a week to celebrate school counseling, but it's also a great week to advocate for the school counseling role. So good time to educate others, administrators, teachers, stakeholders on what it is that school counselors do. So there's a lot of great resources on this slide if you want to check them out and take even just 1 or 2 of them to try and use in this school year. This next one is, as you know, February, we shifted our calendar a little bit. So we are not meeting live next month, but instead we have a lot of different resources linked in case you want to dive in a little bit more to tier 2 support. There's a session here on data and how to use data to kind of guide your tier 2 support. And then there's one that was recorded last January. Christy Berger shared about mental health supports. So that's another good one too. But anyway, play around. These are all clickable live links on these graphics if you want to check out any of these over the next month. And then some other upcoming events just from Counselor Connect. If you click on the green link here, it will take you to the registration information page for all of these events that are coming up from now until about mid-March. So take a look at those. And then as always, here's our PGP LinkedIn if you do want a PGP document. And that is all we have. It's a little shorter today. So you get a little bit of time back, but if there are any other questions, we will hang out for a second to answer those.